Welcome today to Just Jane 1813. Today we have a new guest joining us. His name is Harry Frost, and I would like to welcome him here today as we celebrate the launch of the new audiobook for the Darcy Monologues. Welcome to Just Jane, Harry.
Thanks, Claudine. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Oh, you're welcome. Could you tell my readers today why you're here as part of the audiobook launch?
Well, I have been narrating and producing the audiobook through a platform called ACX, which is run by Amazon. And Christina Boyd, the editor, contacted me, asked me if I'd like to audition, having seen some samples and stuff on my profile on that platform. And I just thought it sounded like a great project, great challenge. So I went for it and thankfully got it.
Wow, that is very interesting how Amazon is matching people across the world. Can you tell us a little bit about your background so that we can maybe understand why you were interested in becoming part of this project?
Sure. Well, I'm 28. I'm English. I live in Leicestershire, which is in the south of, well, sort of middle of England, very close to Derbyshire. It's only about an hour away from Chatsworth House. And yeah, I started acting when I was in boarding school, and I carried it on at university where I studied literature. So really just producing audiobooks is a way to sort of match up those two passions, books and performance. And yeah, this one is great. I've always loved the literature of the Regency era, you know, sort of Eliot and Austen and the Brontes and all that kind of stuff. So I studied a lot of that, and it's just a really nice, project to be involved in.
Oh, that's great. And you talk a little bit about being part of this project. This is your first audiobook project then?
Well, it's the first one I've narrated and produced entirely myself. Yeah, I've done quite a lot of voice acting before, and then stage and stuff like that. So yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful. Are you waiting for your own Mr. Darcy role one day?
Oh gosh, I think I might have peaked a bit early with Mr. Darcy.
You never know.
You never know.
I have heard part of the audio narration and I love it. Christina had sent me a few samples along the way, and then when the book was completed. So I think that you did a great job. And I was wondering, is this the first book that is titled or really in the subgenre of Jane Austen fan fiction that you have read before?
It is the first, yeah. But, you know, I read plenty of historical fiction, and it's all very sort of similar. And yeah, I've read fan fiction before. It's, you know, a great kind of really alive kind of tradition of literature where everyone kind of really lives the literature that they love, which I like.
So what did you think of the Darcy Monologues? What was your reaction to reading this collection of stories? I'm sure that you realize it's a collection that I love intensely. I read every story, I've read probably every story at least 2 or 3 times. And I just really always felt very connected with the Darcy character throughout each and every scenario and setting that he was presented in. But what were your thoughts about this collection?
Yeah, well, I read it several times as well, for different reasons, but it was great. The thing I really like, you know, to produce an audiobook, you really have to totally give yourself to the internal logic of the story. So at any one time, I was completely immersed sort of in that. And it is great being inside Darcy's head, particularly because there are a number of stories, particularly in the collection, that do this, but Darcy has a kind of internal sort of logic that makes sense to him. Is very sort of noble and clear and things like that. And things make sense to him. And sort of as the reader, you're inhabiting that. And the more clear and decided you are as Darcy, the more you can feel the reader kind of squirming and being like, no, Darcy, that is not it. Just talk to someone, just, you know, externalize it. So that was a really fun sort of thing to get involved with.
That's a really great point. You know, when you talk about getting Darcy a certain way, and that he has like sort of like guiding principles
Mm,
that transcend into each character or story. I think that for most readers in this subgenre, that's what's really important, the
mm.
characterization of the characters, especially Darcy and Elizabeth, when you're reading a story based on Pride and Prejudice. So it's just so like wonderful that you could kind of connect and feel that too, especially through these stories that I think also did a really great job connecting and creating Darcy in all these different eras. But, you
Mm.
know, one thing I didn't think of when I was thinking about the audiobook being made was the fact that there were so many accents that you had to capture, and so many different other characters that are involved, especially more so because there are so many different short stories and because they take place in different time periods and in different settings. So, you know, there are some really remarkable voices in the story, like in Joanna Starnes's story. She has her Lady Catherine character, she has the vicar, she has the physician.
Mm.
And when you think about in Bo North's story, she has the Brooklyn accent, she has a Czech accent. And then if you think about Natalie Richards' story that takes place in the West, she also has, you know, such a variety of accents in her story too. And that's just to name a few. So can you tell us what it was it like to capture all of those accents for the audiobook? And where did you find inspiration for all of these characters?
Yeah, characterization in audiobook it's a really, really interesting and kind of involved thing as a performer, certainly. And you've got the narrator character, which is often Darcy in this collection, or it's a third person narrator, and that's a more conventional kind of acting job. You really get into the mindset of the character, and you build up a sort of vocabulary of vocal habits that they use, you know, pitch and tone and accent, and there's that. And so that's how you differentiate that character. But then the minor characters that kind of pop up in the course of the story, they sort of exist with reference to the main character to do a certain purpose in the story. And so that's where accents tend to come in useful for differentiating them, because obviously you've got to differentiate them from the main character, and their purpose in the story has to be immediately clear. And often a way of doing that is kind of employing stereotypes or referring to stereotypes. And so things like the English butler will always sound a certain way.
Yeah.
And, you know, Lady Catherine's very haughty and stuck up. She'll sound a certain way. But it's then hard to find a balance between, you know, over stereotyping so that it sounds comical. So that was a really, really interesting thing to get. I actually had a great aunt who sounded exactly like Lady Catherine, so that was my reference point for that.
Did you tell her that?
Well, no, I probably would tell her that. She'd find it very funny. Yeah, or Lady Bracknell. Do you know the importance of being earnest?
Oh, I do, but why don't that name does not sound familiar. I do. Oscar Wilde, right?
Yeah. It's just a kind of traditional thing in that actor's repertoire, doing a kind of very hammed up English lady who's very indignant all the time. So yeah, that's a staple. I've lived around the UK. The thing is about the UK, it's very small. A lot of people with different accents. I was a bartender for a while in a cocktail bar, so you meet a lot of people with different accents, and I kind of got an ear for that. So the English ones are based on experience, really. People I know, people I've met. The US ones was a real challenge, you know, narrating in an accent that wasn't mine. And yeah, I should probably apologize now in case I've offended anyone by misrepresenting how they talk. But yeah, the aim is, and the hope is, that it's, you know, good enough to fade into the background in the US stories and not distract from the content there.
Well, I think you did a lovely job, and I give you a lot of credit for being able to do that, because just like you said, in the UK, there are a lot of variations with your accents. You know, that's true here in the United States as well. So while you were creating these accents and you were working through the audiobook, could you tell us, was there a character that you connected with the most? Or was there one that you wound up feeling closest to while you worked through this process?
Yeah, I mean, naturally you get to know Darcy a lot, and there's a lot of different Darcys in that. So, yeah, we've kind of covered that. But you know, there are loads of really, really great parts to play as an actor, sort of building up the personae. I really liked the Lizzie in which one was it? Janetta James's Reason to Hope, I
Oh,
think.
yes.
And so yeah, developing like a kind of tough outdoors, slightly upper class land army girl. That was really, really good fun. Ladies' voices was another thing that was relatively new to me. It's kind of interesting to do. I loved doing Corbin, which is the Bingley character in the final story, I, Darcy. He was really good fun. I thought that was a well-written character, and his his lines were really, really great. Let's think various other ones. The flow between Darcy and his sister Georgie, I thought, in what was this? Darcy Strikes Out.
Oh, yes, yes,
I
great.
thought those characters flowed really well, and it wasn't so much identifying with one single character in that. It was that it felt much more like a dialogue-based thing, like a screenplay. It flowed really well, that one. And that was a pleasure to act. And it was also great to do Darcy and Lizzie in the ride home, because Lizzie's slightly drunk, so that's quite fun.
Love that one too. Oh, that's great. That's great. Did you find that Elizabeth is similar to Darcy too, in the way that she also has a set of guiding principles as her character goes through the different stories and settings? Or did you feel that she can be a little bit more loosely played?
Yeah, because this is from Darcy's perspective. I said we're sort of privy to all of his kind of thoughts, and so it's very clear what his guiding principles are. And the dramatic irony that we were talking about earlier, kind of, yeah, comes from his side mainly, and Elizabeth is the kind of reference point that he's looking at and misinterpreting hilariously, and doing all that kind of stuff. But yeah, in a lot of them, you can certainly see the Elizabeth's arc as well, which is kind of nice. And voicing that was good as well, because there are periods in a lot of the stories, just as in the source material, where the last time they spoke was quite acrimonious. They were really shouting at each other. And then the next time they meet each other, stuff has happened in the background and she's softened towards him. So yeah, bringing that in is, interesting, but also quite a challenge to kind of remember where you left it off with them. So
Yeah. I bet. I mean, it's just, I can't imagine being able to do all of that, but you definitely bring that kind of emotionality to the piece. And I think that that's great. I can't wait for readers to be able to listen to the audiobook. Before we end the visit today, I wanted to ask you something that I ask all of the people who visit Just Jane, because this is a question that I love to know more about, and I love to know what people are thinking. Why do you think after 200 years, we're still so connected to Jane Austen and her work?
Well, if this anthology sort of tells us anything, it's that no matter the kind of, it's the superficial elements of the story, like setting or time, these sort of issues that happen are completely timeless, and we can relate them to our own lives. And the central issue, really, isn't it, is the disconnect between how we see the world and how it is, and people are so sort of tangled up in that kind of knot that they end up doing some quite bizarre things to themselves and each other. And then what we enjoy as the reader or the listener, I think, is the dramatic irony of knowing that there is something bigger than them, beyond their misunderstanding and their misapprehensions and stuff like that, something that's kind of big enough to be worth them changing for, and then we get the satisfaction of seeing them change to go and meet it. So I like that.
Wow. See, this is why I asked that question, because every time someone gives me an answer, it really does give me a new perspective on why we enjoy and cherish Jane Austen so much. So thank you for joining and visiting with us today. I'm really excited about the upcoming release. I think that you're going to have a lot of new fans, and I loved getting to know you and your work, and I hope that the Darcy Monologues is appreciated by lots of readers around the world.
So do I. I hope, people enjoy it as much as I've enjoyed making it.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for having me, Claudine.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Have a great evening.
Thanks.